Hi, my name is Herma de Ruiter and I'm the designer behind the going round in circles technique. I've made lots of going round in circles pieces myself, and I've also put together some packs to help people get started going round in circles. And these are two of my packs. You can use them to make the tiny quilted hugs, like that. But you can also use them to make other things. And today I'm going to show you how you can use one of these packs to make a needle book. Now, what you're going to need to get started is obviously one of these packs and some pieces of felt. You're going to need 3 pieces, one about 4 by 8 inches and 2 that are slightly smaller. These are going to be the pages inside your needle book. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, before you can start making your needle book, you need to make the squares that are in this pack, exactly following the instructions. And when you've done that, this is what you'll have. This is the front and this is the back. The next step is going to be joining these 2 pieces together like that. Now you can do that by hand or by machine, and I've got some samples here to show you what that would look like. So this is if you do it by hand, and this is if you do it by machine using a zigzag stitch. So that's the first step that you have to do to make your needle book. Now, when I'm using a machine to construct my projects, I like to do a little zigzag stitch around the edges of my squares so that I'm just working with one edge and not 2, not the fabric and the batting, but just the one edge that has been zigzagged off. And I like to use a very thin thread for that. And one of my favorites is Deco Bob by Wonderful. You can see it's a really, really thin thread, so it won't really show on your work, but it does keep it together. So that's the first thing I do. And after that, I want to zigzag these 2 edges together. And I want to use a more fancy thread to do that. So I've got some options here. This is Tutti, also by Wonderful. So I now have to decide what color thread I want to use in it. So this is a nice pink one. This one's got reds and yellows, and I think I'll be going with that one. This is just red, and this one is pinks and yellows. I like that one too, but I think I'll go with this one. So I'm going to zigzag over these edges to join this together. Now you can see that I've zigzagged the edges together. Now the next step is going to be to add the felt for the inside of your needle book. So you can probably see that it's slightly bigger than my fabric pieces, and that's perfectly all right. You can just trim it down when you've finished stitching it. Now you can stitch this by hand or by machine. If you're doing it by machine, I like to finish it off with a nice zigzagged edge again. Then I always start by doing a straight stitch round the edges, again with the very thin thread so that it doesn't show. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to pin the fabric pieces to the felt, and then I'm going to stitch round the edges with a very thin thread. And when I've done that, I will go back over the edges using a zigzag stitch with the fancy thread to finish them off. Now, if you're doing it by hand, you can pin it and then trim the edges and use a whip stitch to join the 2 pieces together. So I've stitched the fabric pieces to the felt, as you can see, and I'm going to trim a little bit round the edges because you can see that the felt's actually a little bit bigger than the fabric pieces, and that's just because when I've been stitching the circles, my pieces shrink a little bit, so they're not quite 4 by 4 inches anymore like they were when I started. It's not a problem, you just trim round the edges and it'll work perfectly well. So the next step is going to be zigzagging over those edges again to create a nice finish, and I'm going to do that with the same color thread that I used to stitch the 2 pieces together. So I've zigzagged round the edges of my piece, and I actually do that twice, one on the back side and once on the front, so that you get a really nice finish. Now the next step is adding the pages to my needle book, and I've got 2 pieces of felt for that, and they're both slightly smaller than the needle book itself, and they're actually not the same size. This one is a bit smaller than the other one as well. That's what I like. If you want to do your pages all the same size, that's fine too, of course. So you place your pages in your needle book and pin them when you're happy with the placement. And then you turn it round, because I'm going to be stitching right next to where I joined the 2 pieces together. So I'm going to do a straight stitch down one side and then back up the other side, and that will secure the pages of my needle book. So when you've done that, your needle book is almost finished. All it needs now is a cord to close it, and to make that I use 6 strands of the perlé cotton that you've used to stitch your circles on your pieces, and it's about 48 inches of thread, so 24 when you double it up, and I tie that round the button, just with a simple knot. And then I divide it into 3, which gives you 4 strands each, and another 2 from over here to make that 4 as well. That's a bit messy. Okay, and there we are. And then you simply braid it. And you keep on going until you've finished the thread or until you feel your cord is long enough to close your needlebook. I always cut off more thread than I actually need because I'm always afraid it won't be enough. Okay, and I'm going to check to see if my cord is long enough. So it's reaching the button, but I still need a little bit more because I want it to be able to twist it around the button and have some left over. So I'm just going to keep going. Okay, let's check again. Yeah, that's better. So if you feel this is long enough, you can stop now. If you want a slightly longer tail, then you can keep going for another little bit. And when you feel it's long enough, you just knot the end so that it can't unravel. And then cut off the tail. And that finishes your needlebook. So now you know how you can turn this into this. Happy stitching!